Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Animal Legal Defense Fund's Animal Law Academy. My name is Megan, and I am one of our events associates. I'm happy that you're able to join us. Today, we will be discussing the Farm Bill, impacts and opportunities for animal protection. We will have a brief Q&A at the end of the presentation. To submit your questions, please use the Q&A icon at any time at the bottom of your screen. This webinar does offer closed captioning. To turn on, just click the caret icon next to the CC button at the bottom of your screen and select Show Subtitles. Joining us today are Strategic Legislative Affairs Manager, Alicia Prygoski, and Campaigns Manager, Matt Rozelle. Alicia works to develop and advance the Animal Legal Defense Fund's legislative campaigns at the local, state, and federal levels. As campaigns manager, Matt inspires and engages our supporters to participate in Animal Legal Defense Fund's work and increases our success throughout the organization. Thank you for sharing your time and wisdom with us today. I'll pass it over to you and see everyone back here for the live Q&A at the end of the presentation.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today to talk about the Farm Bill. This is such an important issue right now. It is so timely, and I'm really looking forward to chatting about the Farm Bill and how it can protect animals and what we can do to make sure that there are good things for animals in this Farm Bill. So why don't we start by talking about what the Farm Bill is? The Farm Bill is a massive piece of legislation. It's passed about every 5 years, and it governs a wide array of ag, food, and nutrition policies. And it also allocates funding towards specific ag and nutrition programs and commodities. It is a huge, huge spending bill, usually with a cost in the billions in funding for ag and nutrition. The projections for the 2023 Farm Bill, it's really interesting. They're looking even higher at about 1.5 trillion. So a lot more than normal. If the Farm Bill does meet those projections, it's looking like it's going to be the most expensive Farm Bill in U.S. history. I also wanted to mention that it is an omnibus bill, meaning it covers many different facets of ag and nutrition, literally hundreds of different programs and issues in the Farm Bill. And then finally, it's a reauthorization bill. So that means that it needs to be renewed and passed on a continual basis. There are several of these kinds of bills in Congress, and the Farm Bill is one of them. In this case, the Farm Bill is supposed to be passed every 5 years. Now, depending on Congress's time frame for that, it can vary a little bit, but the bill has to be reauthorized or some Farm Bill programs would expire. So that's a very basic overview of what the Farm Bill is. But let's talk about the issues that the Farm Bill covers, sort of within that ag and nutrition world. So what exactly does it include? Every Farm Bill has several different titles, ranging from commodities to nutrition to energy. And then within those titles, there are various programs and policies affecting animals. So I've pulled a list of some of the main titles and some of the main issues from the last Farm Bill. Again, this does vary a little bit from Farm Bill to Farm Bill, but this is really pretty much what we're going to see. These are some familiar ones. So starting with the commodity programs, these are the programs that provide funding to producers based on external factors like low market prices or adverse growing conditions or things like that. They're sometimes known as the farm safety net programs, and they really do have the ability to affect animals because they apply to industries that raise animals for food. So there is a lot of connection there. One example is the Dairy Margin Coverage Program. That applies to dairy producers, and it props up the dairy industry really regardless of whether there is demand, there's market demand, or how the market is trending, whether it's trending toward alternative milks. That is there to kind of prop up the dairy industry. So of course that's going to affect cows, and we have to think about how it does that. And then there's also another one that we frequently encounter is the Livestock Indemnity Program, and that reimburses producers for animals lost in things such as natural disasters. And it reimburses the producers regardless of whether they have emergency preparedness plans in place. So that's one to think about. Okay, should we be calling for change there, and mandating that producers have to prepare for these emergencies and find ways to protect their animals before the emergencies happen. So it's those kind of things that we think about when we look at the commodity programs. There are many, many, many examples of commodity programs affecting animals, but this is really one area where we can fight to ensure that our tax dollars are not being spent to prop up industries that harm animals. And then there's the conservation title. So Farm Bill conservation programs are intended to incentivize and encourage producers to implement conservation and sustainability practices on their land. One of these is the Conservation Reserve Program, and that pays farmers to remove environmentally sensitive land from ag production, and to do things like plant crop species that will improve environmental quality and the ecosystem as a whole. Another one of these is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. So that is supposed to provide funding for farmers to implement more environmentally friendly practices on their land. That could be cover crops, that could be using conservation plans, putting in more pollinator habitat, or rotating crops to maintain the health of the soil, things like that. Then there's also the nutrition title, and that reauthorizes nutrition and food assistance programs. Now, this is interesting because this is where a significant portion of Farm Bill funding goes. About 75 to 80% of Farm Bill funding is typically allocated for the nutrition title. And this is going to be things like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP. That falls under this title and is funded through the Farm Bill. And then food assistance, specifically for seniors, funding for nonprofits that work to provide food assistance, other things like that. The National School Lunch Program is also funded through the nutrition title. So programs like that, that's what the nutrition title covers. There are some opportunities here. There are some opportunities through nutrition programs to help animals by incentivizing and increasing access to plant-based options. So that's another thing that we are constantly keeping an eye on. The Farm Bill also covers agricultural loans, rural development, and then also energy. The energy title, this is a little bit newer actually than some of these other titles in terms of previous farm bills. And it focuses on funding for renewable energy, particularly as it relates to the agriculture industry. So in theory, funding for renewable energy should be a positive move that benefits, the environment, communities, and on some level animals as well. But what we've seen with some of the energy programs, and again, not all of them, but something that we are watching for, is that unfortunately this funding can end up further entrenching the industrial animal agriculture industry instead of truly going toward real renewable energy. So this is a title that we look at as well that has the potential to affect animals. Now you will see animals on this list. There is no animals title. Personally, I think that would be great for a future farm bill, but there are so many ways that animals are affected. Animals are certainly, they fall under this broader category of issues that the Farm Bill covers. It's really important for us to kind of keep that at the forefront of our minds as we're discussing a lot of these other titles and issues and programs, because we need Congress to be thinking about how these programs and how this funding affects animals in every single title of the Farm Bill. So we really just need to ensure that animals remain at the forefront of the discussion there. So now process. This is also really important. Let's talk a little bit about this. Every time the Farm Bill is reauthorized, it has to go through a similar process. The process starts out well before the current Farm Bill expires. So, in theory, there's plenty of time to get a new Farm Bill authorized in time for the current one to expire. In some cases, it does not always play out that way, as you will see with the 2018 Farm Bill, the one that's current right now, and the fact that Congress is running up against the expiration deadline already for the 2023 Farm Bill. But anyway, the timeline in general, it starts with the setting of a Farm Bill budget, and then at that same time, Congress is gathering information from stakeholder groups, from constituents, the general public, about what priorities should be for the Farm Bill. The stakeholder input process is really, really important because it can inform ultimately what does or what does not get included in the Farm Bill. So during that time, members of Congress usually hold listening sessions, they hold town halls, and sometimes, like what we saw with this Farm Bill, the House and Senate Ag committees, which are absolutely key in this process, they can open online portals for stakeholder priority submissions. So really just making sure that stakeholders have access to the committees and to members so that we can voice those concerns and we can put forth those priorities. So then after that, the House and Senate Ag committees draft up the bills. The Ag committee, as you can see on this chart, the Ag committee in each chamber does draft their own. They mark them up, they vote them out, and then they go to the Rules Committee where they can be further amended. So after that, each full chamber debates and then votes on their respective bill. When this is done, you end up with two bills that are going to have conflicting language that needs to be reconciled, right? So we have the House bill, we have the Senate bill, we need to end up with one farm bill. So in order to deal with that, in order to get that done and reconcile that language, the bill then goes to a joint conference committee. So there are going to be members of both the House and the Senate on that to really figure out how to distill these versions into one comprehensive single farm bill. It's going to be a compromise bill. It's going to have priorities from both chambers, and both chambers are going to have to make some concessions in order to get to a place where there is one single bill. So once that is done, once those negotiations are over, each chamber then has to again pass the revised compromise bill before it's presented to the president. So then the bill gets presented to the president signs it into law. And then of course it's up to the federal agencies, most notably the USDA, to figure out how to implement the provisions of the new Farm Bill. So that's the general process. There are some exceptions, and sometimes if the process doesn't happen quickly enough, for instance, Congress has to pass an extension of the current Farm Bill to keep these programs running and to keep them from expiring while it continues to debate on the new Farm Bill. But I mean, this is largely how it happens, despite those exceptions. So where are we in this process right now? We are in a Farm Bill year. 2023 is when Congress is supposed to pass a new Farm Bill. The deadline for that is September 30th. So we are coming up against it fast. We've gone through the stakeholder input process this past winter and spring. We were meeting with offices about priorities, and members have been holding listening sessions throughout the country. So that process has been completed. Now we're waiting to see these drafts. Congress is in recess right now, but when they come back from recess, we're really eager to see what's going to be in the Farm Bill text. So, we're likely to see language from the House at some point in early September with a markup in mid-September, and then the Senate is going to be a little later, probably in October. There are still some question marks here, but this is kind of the tentative schedule that we think we're going to see. And with full chamber debate then, probably not likely to happen until October or later. So, you can kind of see with the process this year, we know there's very little chance of Congress meeting that September reauthorization deadline. Just a couple of reasons for that. Just kind of getting more into the weeds here a little bit. One, debate and drafting is just a slow process. It's hard to agree on priorities. That takes time. But then another reason for this is the appropriations process. This has also been really difficult this year. The federal budget process, that's another reauthorization bill, has to be passed every year. And the deadline for that is October 1st. So once we hit October 1st, if Congress has not passed a new budget bill, we are facing a government shutdown. And so Congress is going to be prioritizing appropriations and the budget when they come back from recess. So you can see that September is going to be a very, very busy month in Congress. So, appropriations, that's taking some priority and time away from Farm Bill as well. And then also the CBO score. The Congressional Budget Office provides Congress with cost estimates related to pieces of legislation, many, many pieces of legislation. So we call these CBO scores, and the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, does this for the Farm Bill as well. So we've heard that they're behind in providing these scores to Congress. So without those numbers, it's kind of difficult for committees to draft the bills. You really need the full picture there in order to do that. So those are just some of the reasons that we're looking at a delayed process this year. Again, They're out on recess right now, but we are going to be watching for the text as soon as they're back to figure out what has made it in, what hasn't, and what we need to do to make sure that animals are prioritized in this process going forward. So with that in mind, let's talk about these opportunities for animals, what we hope to see to help animals, what we want to try to keep out, and what threats there might be for animals in some of this language. So one of the issues I want to start with is enforcement of the Animal Welfare Act. The Animal Welfare Act is one of the only federal laws we have that's designed to protect animals. It imposes minimum standards for the treatment of animals used for commercial purposes. So that's going to be dogs who are bred for sale or wild animals who are exhibited at roadside zoos, that kind of a thing. So the USDA is tasked with enforcement of the Animal Welfare Act, meaning that this really can and it should be at issue in the Farm Bill. There are several standalone bills that address massive loopholes and gaps in enforcement of this act that have resulted in so much animal suffering and neglect. The Animal Welfare Act needs so many fixes. So the language from these bills could be included in the Farm Bill. That's something that we see with standalone bills. You know, a standalone bill can pass on its own, or the language from it can be wrapped into a broader reauthorization bill. We see that often. So that is the case with the Farm Bill too. So it would be ideal for language from these bills that you see on this slide to be included in the Farm Bill. It's not an exhaustive list by any means, but these are three really important ones. So just going through these, the Puppy Protection Act is designed to protect dogs in large-scale commercial dog breeding facilities, also known as puppy mills, you know, the warehouses where dogs are bred for profit, most often in conditions that are dangerous and detrimental for their health and safety. So the Puppy Protection Act would improve standards of care for USDA licensed dog breeders, including things like solid flooring and more space and more frequent food, things that should be very basic needs that unfortunately dogs in puppy mills are not currently guaranteed. Then there's Goldie's Act. We are supporting this one as part of a coalition. It was named after a dog, Goldie, who was suffering at a puppy mill in Iowa. USDA investigators visited that facility, documented that she was suffering, but unfortunately left her there. And then by the time they came back, she had declined to the point where she had to be euthanized. So this bill would require the USDA to confiscate animals that are clearly showing signs of suffering as a result of a failure to comply with the Animal Welfare Act. And then there is the Animal Welfare Enforcement Improvement Act. And this would require several things when it comes to licensing and inspection. It would really bolster the AWA in that way. So it would require dealers and exhibitors to go through unannounced pre-license inspection. It would require them to renew their licenses annually, and then prohibit obtaining license if they've violated any animal protection laws. So again, various changes there to strengthen the Animal Welfare Act. This is something that's always at issue when the Farm Bill rolls around, and we try to do what we can to make sure that the Farm Bill includes language to strengthen this law. Then there is the mink farming issue and the Mink Virus Act. This is another issue that we would like to see addressed in the Farm Bill, mink farming, and specifically, we would like to see the language of the Mink Virus Act included. Mink farming is inherently cruel. Mink are crammed into barren wire cages with no veterinary care, sometimes no access to food or water, and the ways that they are killed are very, very egregious and cause so much suffering. But you know, outside of this, mink pose a grave risk for the transmission of zoonotic disease too, because of these conditions that they're kept in and the fact that those conditions promote the spread of zoonotic disease. So what we've seen is that they're susceptible to some of the same diseases that pose a threat to humans. One of those is COVID-19. Mink are very susceptible to COVID-19. It has spread rapidly at hundreds of mink farms throughout the world, including here in the United States. The first outbreak that was identified in the United States was in Utah in 2020. Since then, we've seen outbreaks at mink farms in Oregon, Wisconsin, and Michigan, resulting in the culling of thousands of animals. And I just want to note one outbreak in Michigan, which was really significant and concerning because it resulted in the first mink to human transmission of COVID-19. 4 Michigan residents, including 2 who worked at the farm, were infected with the exact same variant of COVID-19 that had infected the mink. So really concerning, illustrates completely how mink farming is a risk to public health. And then avian flu is another one that we've seen in mink farms. Currently in the largest outbreak of avian flu in US history. And recently we did see an avian flu outbreak at a mink farm in Spain. So we know, again, mink can contract it. It's incredibly concerning and really should be seen as a warning sign for zoonotic disease transmission. So the Mink Virus Act, this is one that Congress really needs to take seriously. That's what we're pushing for. It would lead to an eventual ban on mink farming in the United States. It would provide for a 1-year phase out for mink farming, and it would also establish a grant program to help operators transition out of this industry, reimbursing them for the full value of their farms. It's a really common sense bill that would reduce the risk for zoonotic disease transmission. So now switching gears a little bit, I want to spend just a little bit of time on legislation that we are concerned about, that we do not want included in the Farm Bill. The Ending Agricultural Trade Suppression Act, more commonly known as the EATS Act. We have been fighting with a broad coalition of organizations to keep this bill and anything like it out of the Farm Bill. The EATS Act is a sweeping federal overreach that would strip away states' rights. It would decimate states' ability to legislate for their own residents within their own borders when it comes to agricultural products. It would eliminate protections for farmed animals, consumers, public health, the environment, sustainable farming, all of those different areas, all of those different stakeholders. It would really put them at risk. It would do so by prohibiting state or local governments from imposing standards on the pre-harvest production of any ag product sold in interstate commerce if the production occurs in another state. So, meaning that if any state permits a potentially dangerous or concerning ag practice, other states would be forced to allow that practice as well. It's intended to invalidate animal protection and public safety laws like California's Proposition 12. I'm sure many folks have heard of that. It prohibits the sale of animal products from animals raised in extreme confinement on factory farms. And this is the one that the Supreme Court upheld earlier this year. So EATS is a direct response to that. The way the EATS Act is drafted, the overbroad and ambiguous language of the EATS Act, it would have a much further reach than just addressing laws like Prop 12. It would hinder states' ability to regulate ag products sold within their borders, and it could risk invalidating more than 1,000 state and local laws intended to protect consumers, intended to promote food safety, and importantly, like we talked about before, state laws intended to protect against zoonotic disease transmission. So, this is just a small snippet of the types of state laws that could be invalidated by the EATS Act. Just real quick, some laws to protect against zoonotic disease by regulating animal importation and identification and inspection requirements, prohibitions on the import of horses for slaughter, invasive plant importation requirements, food safety and labeling requirements. Those are really important for consumers so that we know what we're getting when it comes to the food that we're purchasing at the grocery store. Laws prohibiting the sale of products then from animals raised in extreme confinement, like we were talking about with Prop 12. So over 1,000 state and local laws could be invalidated by this one federal piece of legislation. And while we are on this slide, I just want to give a shout out and thank the Harvard Law School Animal Law and Policy Program, because last month they released a report on the EATS Act that lists all of those state laws that could be invalidated. This is going to be in our resources when we do post the recording of the webinar. I highly suggest that you check it out because it is a pretty amazing report, and it's really valuable. If anyone is interested in meeting with their members of Congress or their staff, Matt is going to talk about this in a minute, but I would suggest taking a look at this report and looking at your own state-specific laws that could be invalidated and bringing that up in that meeting. It's an incredible list, and it just shows the full extent of what this legislation could do. So this actually isn't the first time that we've seen a bill like the EATS Act introduced in Congress. We've seen similar language introduced over the course of about the last 10 years or so, designed to invalidate laws like Prop 12. In 2018, the EATS Act was known as the Protect Interstate Commerce Act. It had essentially the same language. That was the standalone bill. And then it was known as the King Amendment during the 2018 Farm Bill discussions. So this has been attempted in previous farm bills. It was introduced by former Congressman Steve King. And, the EATS Act is essentially the same thing. It's just an updated iteration of the King Amendment. So there was overwhelming opposition to the King Amendment then. There is overwhelming opposition to the EATS Act now. It was a really incredibly strong coalition that opposed the inclusion of the King Amendment in the 2018 Farm Bill, and it worked. We defeated it. We can defeat this again. We're fighting this again, and all of us can work together to defeat this again. But to do that, we really need your help. I can't stress it enough. We really need folks' help on this one. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt in a second to get into that a little bit more, and what you can do to advocate most effectively for it. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention, what's next. Conclude by saying, again, we're going to be watching the Farm Bill. My hope is that Congress can get this done maybe by the end of the year by passing an extension, but it is a bit of a mystery. So we're going to keep our eye on it, and we're going to keep our eye on what we can do to make sure that animals are protected and we can get the best language for animals that we possibly can. So with that, I will turn it over to Matt. Thank you so much, everybody.
Hey, thank you so much. My name is Matt Rozelle. I'm the campaigns manager here at the Animal Legal Defense Fund. I am very excited to be here, and I'm glad you're here too. Now that you've all learned about the Farm Bill and all the implications for animals, I want to talk a little bit about the ways you can work with us at the Animal Legal Defense Fund to use your power as a citizen advocate to influence this federal legislation. But first, I want to invite you to our 31st annual Animal Law Conference. So next slide, please. October 20th through the 22nd at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles is our 31st annual Animal Law Conference. We have an excellent lineup of expert speakers covering a wide range of topics. You can check out the agenda online, and you should grab your spot now. There's going to be great networking opportunities, delicious plant-based meals. I'm moderating a talk on local activism, and overall it's going to be really rewarding and educational. You don't want to miss it. Please consider attending. You can attend live, in person, or virtually, and you can find out all about it at animallawconference.org. So, what is legislative advocacy? This is really using your power as a citizen and your voice to influence legislation. The most common form is direct lobbying, or it's also known as citizen lobbying. And this is simply when you as a constituent contact a legislator, share your views on an issue, and ask them specifically to vote a certain way on a bill. I'm sure you've all participated in lots of various forms of this. There's the click through emails. As a constituent, you can call your legislator's office, which is very common, setting up a meeting with your representative or their staff to discuss a bill. All of these are examples. We're going to get into more about these various strategies and what works best here in a minute. But I want to talk a little bit about why legislative advocacy is so important. So next slide. Legislative advocacy is really the best way you can make a lasting, impactful change for animals. And it's critical to the success of our legislative work here at the Animal Legal Defense Fund. We really can't pass animal protection laws or defeat harmful laws without your support. As a constituent, you arguably have the most powerful and persuasive voice in Congress. Legislators really do want to hear from their constituents, and the role you play in this process really cannot be overstated. For example, on numerous occasions, we have seen a legislator immediately following a constituent meeting, having them take up our side on an issue, or even introducing a bill. We've also seen legislators shift their position immediately after their office phone is ringing off the hook, or even a dozen concerned phone calls from constituents in a single day can make all the difference. Conversely, we have seen legislators say that they didn't take a position on an issue because they didn't hear from anyone and they didn't think it was important. It often doesn't take that many people to influence a legislator to do the right thing. It just might be that your letter or your call or the meeting that you take is the one that makes the difference. And really, one of the things I want to emphasize, when you keep at it and you develop a relationship with staff and the legislators, it is highly likely that your influence will make a difference. So let's get into it. What works best? Next slide, please. What's the most effective way to influence legislation? The most common citizen lobbying tool is, as you probably know, emails and phone calls to legislators. You may have had an opportunity to testify in a hearing, maybe on a state bill or local bill, or even in Congress, depending on where you live. And you may have scheduled a meeting with your legislator. That's another good option. But let's first talk about the most common, quick and easy one, the click-through emails. These are the mass emails that you get from our organization and other organizations. They're very common, but are they effective? Well, a poll was conducted by the Congressional Management Foundation, and they found 79% of grassroots advocacy professionals said that these mass email campaigns are the primary strategy that they currently employ to contact members of Congress. Well, so that's a lot of emails, but are they working? The researchers wanted to find out if they were actually working. So next slide. To answer this question, congressional staff were surveyed on a variety of advocacy strategies, asking the questions about the effectiveness of each. But before I tell you what they found out, we're going to do a little audience participation and see what you think the answer is. So please answer this poll question. What percentage of congressional staff reported that click-through emails have a lot of positive influence on a member or senator who has not already arrived at a firm decision? The poll is open. Go ahead and make your choice. From 51% down to 3%, what percentage of congressional staff said click-through emails have a lot of influence? We're going to give it just a few more seconds here. Make sure everyone has a chance to vote. And okay, so there's some pretty mixed results. Some people are optimistic that it has a high percentage, kind of more people in the middle. I want to tell you the answer is actually 3%. So if you answered 3%, you're correct. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at the data and see what we can learn from it. Let's go on to the next slide. And first of all, the point in sharing that information with you is not to discourage you in any way from participating in the emails. Please do not conclude that. In fact, these emails do make a difference, especially reinforcing support for positions legislators have already taken up and raising awareness on issues that may otherwise be completely ignored. But the truth is, because Congress is flooded with form emails, they are not as effective as some of the other strategies. The take home should be, please do the emails and then do more. If you really want to change a legislator's mind, more effort is needed than just a click-through email. It requires personal contact, relationship building, and trust. So let's look at this data a little bit, because the dark colored line, the dark orange, represents a lot of positive influence from all of these various strategies, and the lighter color represents some influence. So you can see even the form emails have influence. They just don't have a lot of influence. And the graph, it's kind of clear that the form emails are at the bottom. Topping the list are in-person visits from constituents. So phone calls are much better than form emails. And look at how much more influential individualized emails are on this list. So when you see the message in our emails, and we ask you every time, please personalize the message to make a bigger impact. We're not just saying that, the data really backs it up. And so what we've learned, if you look over all of these various strategies, it kind of follows that what's fast and easy is not always the most effective. And the more involved and personal the engagement is, the more effective it is. So it's about building relationships with legislators. So let's get to know our legislators. On to the next slide. If you don't already know, it's very easy to find out who your legislators are. A quick search will show you who represents you at the local, state, and federal levels. Specifically for the Farm Bill and other federal bills like the EATS Act and the Mink Virus Act that we've just been discussing, this is Congress. So you'll want to be focusing on your federal representative in the House of Representatives who represents your federal district, and your 2 federal senators who represent everyone in your state in Congress. We have a website. You can plug in your address and you can find out who your elected officials are at the state and federal level. So that's just aldf.org/find-my-rep. And then if you want to also find out about your local representatives, you can go to usa.gov/elected-officials and find out your local reps as well. So now that you know who your reps are, let's learn a little bit more about them. Let's go on to the next slide. A lot of this information about your legislators is right on their website. Here is my representative, Congresswoman Kamlager-Dove, and her About page has her bio, her committee assignments, events coming up. You want to check out these events. There may be a town hall you could attend, a public gathering that you might be able to attend and meet them, have a chance to talk to them about the issues that are important to you. On their website, you're going to find their voting record, the bills they sponsored, and a whole lot more. Important to the Farm Bill, note if your reps are on the agricultural committees. That is where this is being heard, and those are the most, the members that we need to contact the most. While on their site, sign up for their e-newsletter and follow them on social media. Social media is a great way for you to insert yourself into the conversation that they're talking about and find ways to introduce the animal issues into the conversation. You can also do Google research and read news stories about your legislators, find out everything you can about them, really. Your goal is to understand what they care about most and find common ground. So if their philosophy aligns with yours, that's great. But if not, you need to keep looking for ways you can relate and connect with them. You can look up their alma mater. You can see what occupation they hold, if they hold one outside of Congress. The awards they've received, if they've championed any animal causes, or maybe they've worked on environmental protection or other social justice issues that you care about. If you can find something that you can relate with them on, you have a starting point on a conversation and building a relationship. So now that you know who your representatives are and you know a little bit more about them, it's time to get in touch with them. So let's take action. Next slide. And as I said before, you don't want to skip these click-through emails. They do serve a purpose. And I can assure you that the emails that we send you are very carefully prioritized and timed for maximum impact. But here's a life hack. As an advocate, we're all really busy. Here's a way you can take a little time to maximize your impact when you're doing these click-through emails. Invest another 5 minutes and rewrite the email in your own words. As you have just seen from the data, this makes a huge difference, and the small investment makes a big influence. So if you start doing this, great, you've just made your email 9 times more effective. Now, while you still have your email in front of you before you hit send, this is the best time really to pick up the phone and call the legislators' offices. It's really easy. Please don't let these phone calls intimidate you. Even if it's a little bit out of your comfort zone, you will not be put on the spot with a hard question. The phone will be answered by a staff person, or maybe you'll get an answering machine. Make sure that when you make that contact, you say who you are, state your name, that you're a constituent of Congresswoman Kamlager-Dove in my case. I'm calling in regarding to the bill number, and state your position on the issue, for or against. And now you have your talking points right in front of you because the email is right there. You can say a couple of things, the evidence to back up your case. You might want to ask if they're aware of the member's position on this issue, and then thank them for their time. These calls take just a few minutes. So between personalizing your email and making that call, once you get good at it, you've really only added 8 to 10 minutes to the effort, but you've greatly increased your effectiveness in influencing the legislation. In a short time, this will be just second nature to you, and congratulations, you will have just leveled up. And that small change will become a big change in your effectiveness as an advocate. So it's time to keep going up the ladder of engagement. Let's meet with your legislator. Right now, until the end of August, Congress is in recess, which means that they're not in DC, they're in their home districts, they're taking constituent meetings, they're excuse me, hosting town halls, and out at community events. So I know August is almost over, but it's not too late to check your representative's schedule and see if there's a local event you can attend and meet them. These are great opportunities to introduce yourself and let them know that, you know, the animal protection issues that you want them to consider. And also, this needs not be intimidating. It really is an exciting and rewarding and very effective way to advocate for animals. So let's get prepared for these meetings. I want to give you some tips on how to prepare for a meeting with your legislator. Next slide. So do your homework. We've talked about this. You don't need to be an expert on every issue, but you do want to have a good understanding of the bill or the issue that you're addressing. And you want to take the time, as we said, to research background about your representatives. You're going to make a list of your talking points, and you're going to tailor your message to that representative and what you think will resonate with them. For example, with the EATS Act, if your representative is not really strong on animal protection issues, focus on the other issues related to the EATS Act. The right for states to be able to pass laws that make sense in their state. Prepare a one-page fact sheet that you can leave with a legislator. This is a single-sided page that is with concise points on just one issue or bill. Let us know what you need regarding these materials. We're really here to help you. That's what we want to do. So this webinar is not the end of the conversation. Come to us and ask us for help. So now that you're prepared, let's plan on meeting and making an impression on your legislator. Next slide, please. So first, dress appropriate for the occasion. If it's a meeting in their office, dress for a business meeting. And again, we're going to find that common ground. Remember, legislative advocacy is about building relationships. So you want to work with, not against the legislator. And you want to be prepared to make your point succinctly. If you have a meeting, you may have more time. But in a town hall, you're going to be able to ask probably one question. And if you're at a community event, you may only get a minute with the legislator. So use that time well. If you have extra time and you have a relatable story, share how this issue impacts you personally as a constituent. And keep it conversational. Listen carefully to what they're saying. Take notes. it's really a back and forth communication, and you want to have good notes because you want to be able to follow up later and check in on any commitments they've made and find out where they stand on the bill. You want to become the constituent that they trust who shares reliable information about animal protection issues. So stay positive and professional, even if you're challenged or initially dismissed. And it's not uncommon to get a little pushback or sometimes get devil's advocate type of questions. Be ready for this and reply calmly with facts. You may also get asked a question that you just don't know the answer to. Never guess. It's always fine to say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out and get back to you. And this is really a great opportunity to keep the conversation going. You do a little bit of research and you can reply back later. And make sure you have a direct ask in these meetings. What do you want the legislator to do? And make sure that you ask it. And then finally, this is a very important step, not to forget, whenever you meet with a legislator, circle back with us and let us know how it went. This information is really important for us to be able to follow up and see what challenges we have to get this legislator's support. So now we're going to talk just a little bit about the logistics of scheduling a meeting. So on to the next slide. To meet with your representative, when they're in their home district, you want to call the district office. You want to introduce yourself, let them know you're a constituent, and request a meeting with the representative. You want to give them the topic of what you want to talk about, and you'll probably be transferred to the scheduler or maybe a policy staff or even the chief of staff. If they're in DC, call the DC office and do the same thing. You might be able, if they're in DC, secure a Zoom meeting with them or an online meeting with them. And just remember that members of Congress are very busy, even their staff are very busy. So don't be surprised if it takes some time and a little bit of, back and forth before you're able to actually schedule the meeting. Keep note of everyone that you've talked with along the way, their names, their email addresses, and contact information, so that you can keep track of who you're speaking with and keep it all straight. And while it is preferable to meet directly with your representative, don't discount a meeting with their staffers. They're the ones who inform members on the issues, animal protection issues or animal agriculture issues in the case of the Farm Bill. It's very common at all levels of government to meet with staff. And if you make a good impression, you make a convincing argument, the information will be passed on favorably to the representative. You really should know that building relationships with the staff go a long way also in passing legislation. And these are the people who are working constantly with the legislators. They have the most contact with them and a considerable amount of influence over them. So it's really a good thing. And now I just want to talk a little bit about a term that's called grass-tops advocacy. This is another thing that's important for you to consider. We've probably all heard of grassroots advocacy. This is just getting mass support from lots of people to try to influence legislation. It's kind of the ways we've just been talking about. Citizen lobbying is the grassroots advocacy. Grass-tops advocacy is a term that describes an individual person who has extra influence to mobilize support or convince legislators to support the ordinance or the bill. Maybe someone within your circle of friends is friends with a legislator or is a legislator. Maybe they're a prominent community member, a business owner, a local celebrity. Does anyone that you know, or do you know anyone who's in law enforcement or works in the Attorney General's office? Or maybe you have contacts at City Hall or know someone in the farming community who is aligned with us on animal issues. These are the high-profile people that can play a significant role to influence legislators. So it's important to consider who you and maybe also who your friends and family might know. And when you identify these people, come back to us with a list and let us know, because we'll strategize about how we can reach out to them and try to, use their influence to influence legislation. And then just really quickly, I would be remiss if I didn't remind you, please register to vote. On to the next slide, please. I have to put in a plug to register if you're not already registered to vote. As a voting constituent, you have a much bigger impact on legislators. You can visit your state's Division of Elections website to sign up and register. And you can also visit the U.S. Elections Assistance Commission at the website I've listed here. So now, before we conclude, I have one final poll question. After participating in this webinar, how likely are you to take your advocacy to the next level? We're going to give you a few seconds here to vote, and then we'll share the results. Okay. All right. That's really great, actually. I see the majority of people here with us today want to do more. Some of you are just definitely raring and ready to go. So I love to see that. We are here to work with you on this. It's a partnership. We really need your help. So please do reach out. And in the next slide, you can see my email address. Please take this down. I'm here to communicate with you. I can pass information on to Alicia. We can definitely work with you on helping to influence the Farm Bill. So we really can't do this without you. And we thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us today to learn more about how we can work together on this. And you can find out more information at our website, aldf.org. And now we still have a few minutes for any questions, if anyone has any.
Yes, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Alicia. And we are ready to open it up to Q&A. We have had a couple come in while you were speaking, but anyone else, if you have any questions, just use that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and go ahead and get those submitted to us. One that's already come in. I appreciate the webinar and want to get more active working on legislation, but I really just don't know where to start. What do you recommend?
Well, I guess the first thing to do is just send me an email. Let's start talking about it. I mean, I don't want to go into great detail, but I really feel like once we're in a one-on-one conversation, we can figure out who your legislators are. I can help you walk through the steps. Alicia will be there to fine-tune the talking points. We can get you everything you need to have an effective meeting if you want to try to strategize around that. So I think that the first step is let's become friends. Give us a call or email us, and we'll help you.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I couldn't agree more. I think there are so many different ways to get involved, and we can talk through all of those ways to get involved. Matt's email is still up on the screen. So we are so excited that folks are excited about this work and want to do this work, and we are more than happy to help.
Great. Another one, you mentioned that the Farm Bill funding can go to energy sources that aren't really renewable. What does that look like, and why does that happen?
Yeah, so that is an unfortunate reality. It's something that we see, and it's something that we try to track because this affects our environment, this affects animals, and this is really a concern. Renewable energy funding is supposed to go to energy that is actually renewable and actually sustainable and good for the climate. But unfortunately, there's been a significant amount of greenwashing with certain energy sources that are not actually renewable. One of those is factory farm biogas. This is something that folks may have heard about. Biogas is created, just to sort of give the real quick explanation of it. It's created when methane waste from factory farms is converted into energy. It's then sold for profit. So it's creating another revenue stream for industrial animal agriculture. And industrial animal ag, I mean, it is responsible for a significant percentage 37% of methane emissions in the United States. And emissions from this sector, I mean, they continue to rise as the industry gets bigger and as the industry grows. So we really shouldn't be propping up and funding through the Farm Bill, funding an industry that contributes so heavily to greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution by offering those incentives and tax credits. So that is one of the things that we're watching. And that's what I was referring to when I was talking about that energy title in the Farm Bill, because we do want to see that going to programs and policies that are truly going to make an impact on climate, on emissions, on pollution, and really do what that funding is intended to do versus something like biogas.
Excellent. Another one about the Farm Bill. You mentioned there's some deadlines coming up. If Congress doesn't pass a new Farm Bill by the deadline and also can't get an extension passed in this time, what would happen? And what is the likelihood of that happening?
Yeah, that's an interesting one too. That's a really interesting one, and we hope that that doesn't happen. So yes, that is correct. We are looking at a September 30th deadline for the Farm Bill. Congress is very, very, very likely not going to hit that just because of all the things that we discussed before, all of the delays, everything else that's happening. So, you know, in theory, if they do not hit that deadline and if there's no extension, it's very possible that a lot of the programs in the Farm Bill could expire. And so, you know, what happens then? Some of the programs would go away completely, and essentially things would revert back to the way that they were when the original Farm Bill passed back in the 1930s, I believe. And so it would essentially just kind of create chaos. You know, it would create chaos within the industry for the USDA that runs a lot of these programs. I think that USDA would probably have to figure out ways to fill gaps in programs. You know, some of them would expire right away, you know, day one kind of a thing. Some of them are funded through the end of the year. So it really does kind of depend on the individual program, but it's not something that we want to see happen. You know, that's why we have that deadline that we hope Congress does adhere to. And of course, if they don't, passing an extension of the current Farm Bill so that there is funding and it gives them more time to debate and more time to figure out the future Farm Bill, which is the 2023 Farm Bill. It's a really interesting thing to take a look at.
Thank you. This one talks about the EATS Act a little bit. Can you explain what we're up against regarding the EATS Act? And is this legislation that is favored by the meat, dairy, and industry lobbyists?
Yeah, so I mean, we are up against some pretty fierce opposition, and that's why I keep saying, you know, we need everybody. We need everybody with this one to make sure that the EATS Act is not in the Farm Bill. That's exactly right. You know, I mean, you look at the folks who were behind the lawsuit challenging Proposition 12. It is industry folks. It is ag industry. You know, but it's the large industrial animal agriculture companies. I mean, I can't stress this enough. There are so many smaller and sustainable farmers who do not want to see the EATS Act included, you know, who are on our side, who are part of our coalition. So we have so many varied stakeholders, even within some subsets of agriculture, who really understand that this is not going to benefit a lot of those smaller, more sustainable folks. It's essentially going to give a free pass to these large conglomerates, these massive companies who have animals in factory farms to really do whatever they want, because it would wipe away all of those state and local specific laws that are intended to protect those specific regions. So yeah, I mean, it is the larger conglomerates and companies that we're up against. But I will say, I mean, this coalition is doing a really good job. It is very clear that our coalition is being heard. It is very clear that members of Congress are aware that, you know, this could be a threat. There was actually just a letter from 171 members of the U.S. House of Representatives opposing the EATS Act. So we are getting there. But I just, you know, again, can't stress it enough that we need your help. So if you're interested in getting involved in that fight, please do reach out to Matt and we can all connect on that.
Excellent. Well, we have some more great questions, but we are running out of time. So I encourage everybody to definitely send those messages or those questions into Matt, and we can absolutely make sure to get them answered for you. But Matt and Alicia, thank you so much for taking your time and for all of the great information that you've shared with us today. You will be able to see a recording of this webinar along with past webinars on our website at www.aldf.org/webinars. If we didn't get to your question, like I said, you can reach out to Matt, but you can also always reach out to our events inbox, and that's events@aldf.org. Please take a moment to complete the survey that will pop up on your screen to help us in future planning. You might need to click a blue continue button to access it. Thank you so much for joining us, and please know how much we appreciate your ongoing support of the animals.